Maya's alarm buzzed at 5 in the morning, just like every other day. She rolled over in her tiny studio apartment, looking at the pile of bills on her nightstand. The numbers always looked worse in the morning light. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was still $200 short. She stumbled to the small kitchenette and made instant coffee. Real coffee was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. As the water boiled, her eyes fell on the old piano pushed against the far wall. Dust had settled on the keys again. When was the last time she'd played? 2 weeks? 3? The piano had been her grandmother's. It was the only thing of value she owned, but she couldn't bring herself to sell it. Every time she thought about calling the piano dealer, her heart would break a little more. That piano held her childhood, her dreams, everything she used to be. Maya grabbed her work uniform from the closet. Black pants, white shirt, comfortable shoes. The same outfit she'd worn for the past 2 years at Meridian Restaurant. It was one of those fancy places downtown, where business people ate lunch and wealthy families celebrated anniversaries. The kind of place she used to dream about performing at, back when she thought music would be her career. The bus ride to work took 40 minutes. Maya used the time to count her tips from yesterday. $38. Not bad, but not enough. Never enough. She watched the city wake up through the window. People in expensive cars heading to office jobs, joggers in brand-name workout clothes, students carrying laptops worth more than her monthly salary. 3 years ago, Maya had been one of them. Sort of. She'd been a student at the Chicago Institute of Music, one of the best schools in the country. Her professors said she had real talent. Exceptional, they called her. She'd believed them. She'd believed in a lot of things back then. The restaurant was already busy when she arrived. Meridian served breakfast to the early crowd. Lawyers, doctors, executives. People who ordered $40 steaks for lunch and didn't blink at the price. Maya tied her apron and grabbed her notepad. Another day, another dollar. Literally sometimes. Maya, you're on Section 3 today, called Tony, the shift manager. Section 3 was the main dining room. Good tips demanding customers. She preferred it to the private rooms where rich people held their secret meetings and treated the staff like furniture. Her first table was a couple celebrating their anniversary. 40 years married, they told her. They ordered champagne and held hands across the table. Maya smiled and took their order, but inside she felt hollow. When would she have time for love? For celebration? For anything besides work and worry? The morning rush was typical. Coffee refills, special orders, difficult customers who sent their food back twice. Maya moved through it all with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to smile even when her feet hurt, to stay polite even when customers were rude, to keep going even when everything inside her wanted to stop. Around noon, the lunch crowd began filtering in. This was when the real money came. Business deals over expensive meals, rich families who tipped well if you remembered their preferences. Maya had gotten good at reading people. The woman in the designer suit who wanted her salad dressing on the side. The older man who always ordered the salmon but complained it was too salty. The young couple who came in every Friday and ordered the same appetizer to share. But today felt different. There was tension in the air. The hostess kept checking her reservation book, and the manager had been on his phone all morning. Around 1 o'clock, Maya found out why. "We have a VIP coming in at 2, Tony announced during the staff meeting. "Private dining room. Big spender. I want everyone on their best behavior." Maya had worked enough VIP tables to know what that meant. Someone with more money than sense, who expected to be treated like royalty. They always wanted special treatment, custom orders, and they usually complained about something. But they also tipped well, and Maya needed every dollar she could get. The afternoon dragged on. Maya's section stayed busy, but her mind kept wandering to the piano at home. She'd been composing a new piece before her life fell apart. Something soft and sad, inspired by her mother's illness. She'd never finished it. There hadn't been time, and when she finally had time, the emotions were too raw. Her mother had been diagnosed with cancer during Maya's final year at music school. The treatment was expensive, even with insurance. Maya had taken a part-time job to help with bills, then dropped to part-time classes, then finally left school altogether. The music could wait, she told herself. Her mother couldn't. The treatment had worked, thank God. Her mother was in remission now, living in a small town 3 hours away. But the medical bills remained. Thousands of dollars that seemed to multiply every month. Maya sent what she could, but it never felt like enough. At 1:45, the restaurant started preparing for the VIP arrival. Extra flowers on the tables, the good silverware, Fresh bread in the baskets? Maya wasn't assigned to the private room, but she could see the activity from her section. Whatever this person did for a living, they had serious money. The dining room had a beautiful grand piano in the center. It was mostly for decoration now, though sometimes they hired pianists for special events. Maya always wondered who had chosen the songs, whether they knew anything about music or just picked what sounded fancy. The piano was a beautiful instrument, probably worth more than she'd make in 5 years. Sometimes, late at night when she was closing up, she'd run her fingers across the keys, never playing, just remembering what it felt like to make music. A group of businessmen walked past her section toward the private room. Expensive suits, confident walks, the kind of people who made decisions that affected thousands of other people's lives. Maya refilled water glasses and tried not to stare. She'd learned that wealthy people didn't like being watched, even though they often acted like they were performing for an audience. Her shift would end at 10 tonight, 13 hours on her feet, serving people who made more in an hour than she made in a month. But the alternative was worse. No job meant no apartment, no way to help her mother, no hope of ever returning to music school. Maya looked at the piano one more time before heading back to the kitchen. Someday, she promised herself. Someday she'd play again, really play, not just dust off the keys in her apartment. Someday she'd finish that composition for her mother. Someday she'd have a life beyond survival. But today wasn't that day. Today was about taking orders, carrying plates, and counting tips. Today was about getting through another shift in a life that felt nothing like the one she'd planned. The VIP guests were settling into their private room. Maya could hear their loud voices, their confident laughter. In a few hours, they'd leave in their expensive cars and forget all about the restaurant, the staff, the girl who served their water and cleared their plates. Maya straightened her apron and grabbed her notepad. Table 12 needed their check, and Table 15 was ready to order dessert. The night was just beginning. The private dining room was buzzing with conversation when Maya first walked past. Through the glass doors, she could see 5 men in expensive suits gathered around the large table. Their voices carried confidence and authority. These were people used to being heard, used to getting their way. Maya was covering for another server who'd called in sick, so she found herself assigned to help with the VIP room. Her stomach tightened. Private rooms meant more pressure, higher expectations, and wealthy customers who sometimes treated staff like they were invisible. The host of the dinner was a man in his early 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes. James Morrison. Maya recognized the name from the reservation book. She'd heard other servers talk about him. Tech billionaire, they said, made his fortune creating some app that everyone used but no one really understood. The kind of rich that was hard to imagine. Morrison had brought 4 other men, all looking equally important and expensive. They talked in numbers that made Maya's head spin. Millions, billions, market shares, and profit margins. They ordered the most expensive items on the menu without even looking at the prices. Maya served their drinks, trying to stay invisible the way she'd learned to do with wealthy customers. But Morrison kept watching her, not in a creepy way, just observant, like he was studying her, trying to figure something out. It made her nervous. "Excellent service," Morrison said when she refilled his wineglass. "You move very gracefully. Have you had formal training in hospitality?" Maya shook her head. "No, sir, just experience." "Interesting." His eyes followed her as she moved around the table. "There's something different about you. You carry yourself like you're used to being on stage." The comment hit too close to home. Maya forced a polite smile. "Thank you, sir. Will there be anything else?" But Morrison wasn't finished. As the evening progressed, his attention kept returning to her. During their main course, he asked where she was from. During dessert, he wanted to know if she went to school. Each question felt like a test, though Maya couldn't figure out what he was testing for. The other men at the table grew increasingly uncomfortable with Morrison's interest in the waitress. They'd come here to discuss a major business deal, not watch their host interrogate the staff. But Morrison was known for his unpredictable behavior. It was part of what made him successful and part of what made him difficult to work with. Around 9:00, after they'd finished their meal, Morrison stood up and walked toward the main dining room. Maya was clearing plates when she heard him stop. She looked up to see him standing next to the grand piano, running his fingers along its polished surface. "Does anyone ever play this?" he asked Tony, the manager who had hurried over. Sometimes we hire pianists for special events, Tony replied. It's mostly decorative now. Morrison pressed a few keys. The notes rang clear and beautiful in the quiet restaurant. Most of the dinner crowd had left, and the few remaining customers looked over with interest. Shame to waste such a beautiful instrument, Morrison said. Then his eyes found Maya across the room. You come here. Maya's heart started pounding. She looked around, hoping he was talking to someone else, but his gaze was fixed on her. She walked over slowly, feeling like she was approaching a trap. Sir? Morrison smiled, but there was something calculating in his expression. I have a theory about you. You move like a performer. You speak like someone with education. And you've been watching this piano all evening. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. I was just working, sir. Play something, Morrison said suddenly. The request hit Maya like a physical blow. The four businessmen had followed Morrison out of the private room and now stood watching the scene unfold. Other customers were staring too. The entire restaurant seemed to have gone quiet. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm working, Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm not asking as a customer, Morrison replied. I'm making you an offer. Play one song and I'll pay you $1,000. The number stunned Maya into silence. $1,000. That would cover her rent with money left over. It would buy groceries for a month, maybe 2 if she was careful. It would let her send something to her mother for the first time in weeks. But the way Morrison was looking at her, the way the other men were smirking, made her feel like a performing animal. Like he wanted to see the poor waitress dance for money. I don't play anymore, Maya said quietly. Everyone plays something, Morrison insisted. Piano lessons, school band, church choir. Come on, don't be shy. One of the businessmen chuckled. James, let the girl get back to work. We have contracts to discuss, but Morrison waved him off. He was focused entirely on Maya now, like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. $2,000. One song. The amount made Maya's knees weak. $2,000 would change everything. She could pay her rent, catch up on her mother's medical bills, maybe even fix the broken heater in her apartment. But the way Morrison was pushing, the way he kept increasing the amount like she was something he could buy, made her want to run. Sir, I really can't. I'm not a pianist. I just work here. Morrison studied her face for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He sat down at the piano bench and played a simple melody. Nothing fancy, just a basic tune, but he played it well enough to show he had some training. I took lessons as a kid, he said. Hated every minute of it. My mother made me practice for hours, but I can recognize someone who knows music when I see them. He stood up and gestured to the bench. Your posture changes when you look at this piano. Your breathing changes. You're fighting something. Maya felt exposed, like he could see through all her carefully built walls. The other men were getting impatient, checking their phones and whispering among themselves. A few restaurant customers had started to leave, clearly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding. $5,000, Morrison said quietly. One song. Then you can go back to work and I'll go back to my meeting. $5,000. Maya's mind raced with everything that money could do. But she also thought about her pride, her dignity, the way Morrison was treating her like entertainment for his business associates. Why? She asked. Why is this so important to you? Morrison was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. Because I think you're hiding something, and I've built my entire career on finding hidden value where others see nothing. The honesty in his voice surprised Maya. This wasn't just about showing off for his friends. There was something deeper happening here, something she didn't understand. Tony appeared at her elbow, clearly nervous about the scene unfolding in his restaurant. Maya, if you don't want to do this, she wants to do it, Morrison said confidently. Don't you? Maya looked at the piano. The keys seemed to glow under the restaurant lights. She thought about the dusty piano in her apartment, about the music she used to make, about the girl she used to be before life forced her to choose between dreams and survival. I'm not very good, she said finally. Morrison smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuine. I doubt that's true. Maya's hands were shaking as she approached the piano bench. She could feel everyone watching her. The businessmen with their amused expressions, Tony with his worried face, the few remaining customers who had stopped eating to stare. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool under her fingers, familiar in a way that made her heart ache. She hadn't touched a real piano in months. The keys on her grandmother's old upright were sticky, and some didn't work properly. "What should I play?" she asked, looking up at Morrison. "Whatever you want," he replied. "Surprise me." Maya closed her eyes and let her fingers find their way home. Maya's fingers trembled as they touched the keys for the first time in months. The piano was perfectly tuned, nothing like the old instrument in her apartment with its sticky keys and worn-out strings. This was a real concert piano, the kind she'd learned on at music school. She started with something simple, a piece by Debussy that she'd learned in her first year. Clair de Lune. Safe, pretty, the kind of thing people expected to hear in a restaurant. Her fingers remembered the melody even though her mind was racing with nerves. The first few notes were shaky. She could hear the tension in her own playing, the way fear made her touch too light, too careful. But as the melody continued, something began to shift. The music started to pull her in, the way it always had. Morrison stood beside the piano watching her fingers move across the keys. His business associates had gathered closer too, their earlier impatience replaced by curiosity. Even Tony had stopped worrying about the scene and started listening. Maya could feel the restaurant around her growing quiet. Conversations at other tables were fading. The sound of silverware against plates had stopped. But she tried not to think about the audience. She focused on the music, on the feeling of her fingers finding their way home. As Clair de Lune came to an end, Maya lifted her hands from the keys. There was a moment of silence, then polite applause from around the restaurant. She started to stand up thinking she was finished, but Morrison placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That was beautiful," he said, "but I think you can do better." Maya looked up at him, confused. "Sir?" "You're holding back," Morrison said quietly so only she could hear. "That was technically perfect, but it wasn't you. Play something that matters to you." The request caught Maya off guard. Something that mattered to her? She'd been playing safe for so long, choosing pieces that wouldn't reveal too much, wouldn't make her feel too much. Music had become too painful after she'd left school, too connected to everything she'd lost. "I don't know what you mean," Maya said. Morrison pulled over a chair and sat down beside the piano. "When I was building my first company, I had to give presentations to investors. I was so nervous that I memorized every word, practiced every gesture. The presentations were perfect, but they were fake. No one invested." He paused, watching Maya's face. "Then one day I forgot my notes. I had to speak from my heart about why my idea mattered. I was terrified, but it was real. That's the day I got my first investor." Maya understood what he was saying, but it scared her. Playing from her heart meant opening up parts of herself she'd kept locked away for years. It meant feeling things she'd been trying not to feel. "The money isn't about the performance," Morrison continued. "It's about the truth. Show me who you really are." Maya's hands moved back to the keys almost without her permission. There was a piece she'd been working on before her world fell apart. Something she'd started composing during her mother's illness, when she was spending long nights in hospital waiting rooms, trying to process fear and love and desperation. She'd never played it for anyone, never even finished it properly. But her fingers began picking out the melody now, soft and hesitant at first, then growing stronger. The piece didn't have a name. In her mind, she'd always called it Waiting. It was about those endless hours in hospitals, about watching someone you love fight for their life, about the strange mix of hope and terror that becomes your constant companion. As Maya played, the restaurant around her seemed to disappear. She forgot about Morrison, about his money, about the people watching. She was back in that hospital chair, her mother sleeping fitfully in the bed nearby, machines beeping their electronic lullabies. The melody was simple but heartbreaking. It spoke of love stretched thin by fear, of dreams deferred by necessity, of the way life can change everything in an instant. Maya had poured all her grief into this piece, all her guilt about leaving school, all her exhaustion from working 2 jobs while trying to be strong for her mother. Her left hand began adding bass notes, creating a foundation that was both stable and uncertain, like standing on ground that might shift at any moment. Her right hand wove the melody through different registers, sometimes climbing toward hope, sometimes falling back into sorrow. The piece built slowly, the way real emotions do, not in dramatic bursts but in gradual waves that gather strength until they become overwhelming. Maya could feel tears on her cheeks, but she didn't stop playing. She couldn't stop. The music was pouring out of her like something that had been held back too long. Around her, the restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to listen. The businessman who had been checking his phone earlier was staring at Maya with an expression of complete surprise. Morrison's face had lost all trace of its earlier calculation. Maya's composition shifted into a section she'd written about her mother's recovery. The melody brightened, but it carried scars. It wasn't the same as it had been before. Nothing was ever the same after you almost lose everything that matters. She found herself transitioning into another piece, one she'd learned in her advanced studies. Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. It was a piece that demanded everything from a pianist, technically and emotionally, the kind of piece that separated students from artists. Her professors at music school used to say that Chopin was writing his life into his music, all his passion and pain and brilliance. Maya had never understood what they meant until now. As her fingers flew across the keys, she felt like she was writing her own life into the music. Every struggle of the past 3 years, every moment of beauty that had kept her going. The Chopin piece was like climbing a mountain. It started with a gentle, almost innocent melody, but it grew more complex and demanding with each variation. Maya's hand stretched across the keyboard, her fingers dancing through passages that would have challenged her even when she was practicing every day. But somehow she was playing better than she ever had. The years of pain had given weight to her touch. The exhaustion and determination had made her stronger. She wasn't the same pianist who had left music school, but maybe she was a better one. The restaurant had filled with people from other parts of the building. Kitchen staff stood in doorways, their faces stunned. Other servers had stopped their work completely. Even customers from the bar had wandered over to see what was happening. Maya reached the climactic section of the ballade, where Chopin pushes the piano to its limits. Her hands moved faster than thought, muscle memory taking over where conscious control would have failed. The music filled the space like a living thing, touching every person in the room. As the piece reached its thunderous conclusion, Maya felt something break open inside her chest. All the grief and loss and longing she'd been carrying for years was flowing out through her fingers. She wasn't just playing music anymore. She was speaking in a language that went deeper than words. The final notes rang out in the silence, hanging in the air like a question that couldn't be answered. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and sat very still, feeling like she'd just run a marathon. Her heart was pounding, her face was wet with tears, and she felt empty and full at the same time. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Maya was afraid to look up, afraid to see disappointment or pity in the faces around her. She'd shown too much, revealed too much. She'd forgotten where she was, forgotten that she was just the waitress providing entertainment for wealthy customers. Then someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate applause that built gradually as others joined in. Maya finally raised her head and saw Morrison standing beside the piano, his eyes bright with something that looked like wonder. The applause grew louder, filling the restaurant with sound that felt different from polite appreciation. This was the kind of applause that came from being truly moved, the kind that said, "Thank you for showing us something real." Maya looked around the restaurant and saw faces she'd never really noticed before. The elderly couple who came in every Friday were wiping their eyes. The tough-looking businessman from Morrison's table was shaking his head in amazement. Even Tony, her practical manager who worried about everything, was smiling like he just witnessed something magical. Morrison leaned down and spoke quietly in her ear. Now that, he said, was worth every penny. The applause seemed to go on forever. Maya sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response from everyone in the restaurant. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected polite clapping, maybe some compliments, and then back to clearing tables and refilling water glasses. But this was different. People weren't just being polite. They were genuinely moved. The elderly woman at table 6 was crying openly, and her husband was patting her hand while wiping his own eyes. The group of young professionals who usually spent their entire meal looking at their phones were staring at Maya with expressions of complete awe. Morrison was still standing beside the piano, but his whole demeanor had changed. Gone was the calculating businessman who had been testing her earlier. He looked shaken, like he'd witnessed something he hadn't expected to see. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked quietly, his voice almost lost in the continuing applause. Maya didn't know how to answer. The truth seemed too complicated, too personal to share with a stranger. But something about her performance had broken down the wall she usually kept up with customers. "I studied music," she said simply. "Studied where?" Before Maya could respond, one of Morrison's business associates approached the piano. It was the woman who had been quiet during dinner, taking notes while the men talked. Helena Chang, Maya remembered from introductions. She was smaller than the others, but there was something sharp and focused about her that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room. "Excuse me," Helena said, "but could I ask your name?" "Maya Rodriguez," Maya replied, still feeling uncertain about all the attention. Helena's eyes widened. "Maya Rodriguez from Chicago? The pianist who made that video 3 years ago?" Maya's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what video Helena was talking about. During her final year at music school, before everything fell apart, she'd participated in a student competition. Someone had recorded her performance and posted it online. The video had gone viral, shared by classical music pages and professional musicians. For a few weeks, Maya had been internet famous. The rising star, some websites had called her. The future of classical piano. Then her mother got sick and Maya had to leave school. The internet moved on to the next sensation, but apparently some people remembered. "That was you," Helena said, her voice filled with excitement. "I knew I recognized that style. You were brilliant in that video. What happened to you? You just disappeared." Maya felt exposed, like Helena had pulled away a blanket she'd been hiding under for years. She'd worked so hard to become invisible, to blend into the background of other people's lives. Being recognized felt dangerous. "I had to stop playing," Maya said quietly. "Stop?" Helena looked genuinely confused. "But why? You had such talent. I remember thinking you were going to be one of the great ones." Morrison was listening to this exchange with growing interest. "What video?" he asked. Helena pulled out her phone and started searching. Within seconds, she'd found it. "This one. It has over 2 million views." She held up her phone, and Maya saw herself 3 years younger, sitting at a concert grand piano in her music school's performance hall. She was wearing the black dress she'd bought specifically for competitions, her hair pulled back in the classical style her teacher had insisted on. She looked confident, professional, nothing like the exhausted waitress she'd become. "Play it," Morrison said. Helena tapped the screen, and Maya's younger self began playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 solo arrangement. Maya remembered that day perfectly. She'd practiced for months, dreaming of the opportunities that might come from a strong performance. Music schools sometimes had scouts at these events. Record labels occasionally discovered new talent. Watching herself play was surreal. Maya could see the passion in her younger face, the way she moved with the music, completely lost in the performance. The girl in the video believed in the future. She believed that talent and hard work would be enough. "This is incredible," Morrison said, watching the video intently. "This is the same person who just played for us?" "The same person who's been serving our dinner all evening," Helena added. "Maya, what happened? Why are you working here instead of performing?" Maya felt trapped. She'd never talked about this with anyone, never explained why she'd walked away from everything she'd worked toward. But somehow, sitting at this piano with these strangers who had just witnessed her pour her heart out in music, the truth felt less impossible to share. "My mother got cancer," she said simply. "The treatment was expensive. I had to leave school to work." The silence that followed was different from the amazed quiet after her performance. This was the heavy silence of people realizing that life isn't fair, that talent doesn't guarantee success, that sometimes the most gifted people are the ones who get left behind. "But that was 3 years ago," Helena said gently. "Is your mother—" "She's in remission now," Maya replied. "But the bills never stopped coming. And by the time I could think about going back to school, I'd been away too long. I'd missed too much." Morrison was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You've been working at this restaurant for how long?" 2 years. "And in all that time, you never mentioned that you were a concert-level pianist?" Maya almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "When would I mention it? While taking your order? While refilling your water glass? It's not exactly relevant to restaurant work." "Not relevant?" Morrison looked incredulous. "You have a gift that maybe one person in a million possesses and you think it's not relevant?" "It's relevant to a life I don't have anymore," Maya said, feeling defensive. "I have bills to pay. I have responsibilities. Music doesn't pay those bills." Helena was still holding her phone, scrolling through comments on the old video. "Look at this," she said. Juilliard shared this video on their official page. The New York Philharmonic tweeted about it. There are comments from professional musicians saying they'd never heard a student play Rachmaninoff with such maturity. Maya had seen those comments years ago. They'd filled her with hope and pride, right up until the moment her mother's doctor explained the treatment plan and the costs involved. "I remember reading about you," Helena continued. "There were articles in classical music magazines. They called you a prodigy, said you were going to reshape how people thought about romantic period interpretation. That was a long time ago," Maya said firmly. "I'm different now." "Different how?" Morrison asked. "Your playing tonight was even more powerful than that video. More emotional, more mature. You haven't gotten worse, you've gotten better." Maya shook her head. "I haven't practiced seriously in years. I can't afford lessons or coaching. I don't have access to good pianos. I'm not the same musician I was." "You're right," Helena said. "You're better." That performance just now, it wasn't just technically brilliant. It had life in it, pain, real human experience. The girl in this video was talented, but she was still just promising. What you just played was the work of an artist. Maya felt tears starting again. She'd trained herself not to think about what she'd lost, not to imagine what might have been. It was too painful to live in the space between dreams and reality. Morrison sat down in the chair next to the piano, bringing himself to her eye level. "Maya, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If money wasn't an issue, if you could do anything with your life, what would you choose?" The question was cruel in its simplicity. Maya had stopped allowing herself to think about what she wanted years ago. Want was a luxury she couldn't afford. "That's not a fair question," she said. "Why not?" "Because money is always an issue. Because life isn't about what we want. It's about what we can manage. Because some of us don't get to choose." Morrison was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than she'd heard it all evening. "What if I told you that sometimes we do get to choose? What if I told you that the world needs to hear you play? And that there are people who would make sure money wasn't an obstacle?" Maya looked at him skeptically. "You don't even know me. I know you're working 2 jobs to support your mother's medical bills. I know you gave up your dreams to take care of someone you love. I know you have a gift that could move people, inspire them, make their lives better. And I know that gift is being wasted because our society doesn't take care of its artists." Helena leaned forward. "Maya, I should tell you what I do for a living. I run the Chang Foundation. We provide grants and scholarships for promising musicians who need financial support. We've been looking for someone exactly like you." Maya felt like the world was tilting around her. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I don't understand," she said. "We want to invest in your career," Helena explained. "Training, instruments, living expenses while you get back up to performance level. Everything you need to return to music professionally." Morrison nodded. "And I'd like to help with your mother's medical bills. Consider it an investment in American culture." Maya stared at them both, unable to process what she was hearing. "Why would you do that?" "Because 20 minutes ago you reminded everyone in this room why music matters," Morrison replied. "Because talent like yours deserves to be shared with the world. Because sometimes the universe puts the right people in the right place at the right time." Maya looked around the restaurant, at all the faces still watching her with admiration and respect. A few hours ago she'd been invisible to these people. Now they were offering to change her life. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Helena urged. "Say you'll let us help you get back to where you belong." Maya stared at Morrison and Helena, her mind struggling to process what they were offering. After 3 years of scraping by, of making impossible choices between dreams and survival, the idea that someone wanted to help felt too good to be true. "This isn't real," she said finally. "Things like this don't happen to people like me." "What do you mean, people like you?" Morrison asked. Maya gestured around the restaurant, at her uniform, at herself. "I'm nobody. I'm a waitress who couldn't afford to finish school. I'm not special." "Maya," Helena said gently, "half an hour ago you made a room full of strangers cry with your music. If that's not special, I don't know what is." But Maya had been disappointed too many times to trust easily. "What if I'm not as good as you think? What if I can't get back to the level I was at? What if I take your money and fail?" Morrison laughed, but not unkindly. "What if you succeed beyond your wildest dreams? What if you become one of the great pianists of your generation?" What if you inspire thousands of other people the way you inspired us tonight? But what if I don't? Then you don't, Helena said simply. But at least you'll have tried. At least you'll have given your gift a chance. Maya thought about her mother, about the medical bills that never seemed to get smaller, about the rent that was due in 3 days. I can't just think about myself. I have responsibilities. We're not asking you to abandon your responsibilities, Morrison said. We're offering to help you meet them in a different way. Your mother's medical expenses, your living costs while you retrain. Everything you need to focus on music again. It sounded too good to be true. But Maya could see the sincerity in both their faces. These weren't people playing games or making empty promises. They were serious. Why me? She asked. There must be hundreds of talented musicians who need help. Helena smiled. There are, and we help many of them. But what you did tonight, that wasn't just talent. That was artistry born from real experience. You've lived through things that gave depth to your music. That's rare, Morrison nodded. In business, I learned to recognize potential that others miss. You're not just a good pianist, Maya. You're a storyteller. You made everyone in this room feel your story through music. That's a gift you can't teach. Maya felt tears starting again. For 3 years, she'd felt like a failure, like someone who had given up, who had chosen the easy path instead of fighting for her dreams. But maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe surviving had been its own kind of strength. What would I have to do? She asked quietly. Helena pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. First, you'd come to our foundation offices. We'd assess your current skill level and create a plan for getting you back to performance standard. That might mean private lessons, master classes, maybe even finishing your degree. How long would that take? For someone with your background? Maybe a year of intensive work. Maybe less. It depends on how quickly you regain your technique and build your repertoire. Maya thought about a whole year of doing nothing but music. No double shifts, no aching feet, no counting tips to see if she could afford groceries. Just piano every day the way she'd always dreamed it could be. And after that? Morrison leaned forward. After that, you perform. Recitals, competitions, maybe recording opportunities. We help you build a career in music. What if I'm too old? What if I've missed my chance? Helena laughed. Maya, you're 24. Some of the greatest pianists didn't hit their stride until their 30s or later. You have time. Maya looked around the restaurant one more time. The dinner crowd had mostly left, but several people were still lingering, clearly hoping to hear more music. Tony was hovering nearby, probably wondering what was going to happen to one of his best servers. There's something else I want, Maya said suddenly. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Oh? If you're going to help me, I want to help others too. There are probably dozens of musicians in this city working jobs like mine. People who had to give up their dreams because they couldn't afford to keep them. I want to do something for them. Helena and Morrison exchanged a look. What did you have in mind? Maya had never thought about this before, but suddenly the idea felt crystal clear. A scholarship program. Not just for students, but for working musicians who need a second chance. People who had to leave school. People who never got to go in the first place. That's ambitious, Morrison said. It's also brilliant, Helena added, and completely doable. The Chang Foundation could administer something like that. Morrison stood up and extended his hand to Maya. Ms. Rodriguez, I think we have a deal, but I have one condition. Maya's heart sank. There was always a catch. What condition? I want to be at your comeback performance. Front row seat. Maya felt a smile spreading across her face for the first time in what felt like years. Deal. She shook Morrison's hand, then Helena's. It felt surreal, like she was signing a contract for someone else's life. But it was her life, she realized. For the first time in 3 years, she was choosing what came next instead of just surviving what happened to her. Tony appeared at her elbow, looking concerned. Maya, is everything all right? Do you need the rest of the night off? Maya looked at her manager, this kind man who had given her flexible hours when she needed them, who had never made her feel bad about taking on extra shifts when money was tight. Tony, I think I need to give my notice. His face fell. Oh, well, if that's what you need to do. It's not what you think, Maya said quickly. I'm going back to music school. These people are going to help me. Tony's expression shifted from disappointment to amazement. Music school? But I thought you were... you never said you were a musician. Helena held up her phone, showing him the viral video. Your Waitress is one of the most talented pianists of her generation. Tony watched the video with his mouth open. This is you? Maya, this is incredible. Why didn't you ever tell me? Maya thought about how to explain 3 years of survival mode, 3 years of keeping her head down and her dreams locked away. I guess I didn't think it mattered anymore. Didn't matter? Tony laughed. Are you kidding me? Do you know how proud I'm going to be to tell people that Maya Rodriguez used to work at my restaurant? The warmth in his voice made Maya's throat tight with emotion. She'd been so focused on the ways life had disappointed her that she'd missed the kindness that had surrounded her. Tony had been more than a boss. He'd been someone who believed in her worth even when she didn't believe in it herself. I'll work out my 2 weeks' notice, Maya said. Absolutely not, Morrison interrupted. You start your new life tomorrow. Tony, what's Maya's salary here? Tony looked confused. Well, she makes minimum wage plus tips. Morrison pulled out his phone and did some quick calculations. I'm sending you enough money to cover Maya's wages for the next month. That should give you time to find a replacement. Maya stared at him. You don't have to do that. I want to, Morrison said simply. Besides, I have a feeling that investing in your career is going to pay dividends for everyone. Helena was already making notes in her phone. Maya, can you come to our offices tomorrow morning? We should start the paperwork and get you set up with a practice space. Maya nodded, still feeling like she was dreaming. What time? 10 o'clock work for you? Maya almost laughed. 10 in the morning. When was the last time she'd had a 10 a.m. appointment that wasn't a second job interview or a meeting with a bill collector? That works perfectly. As Helena and Morrison gathered their things and said their goodbyes, Maya sat back down at the piano. Her shift was over. The restaurant was nearly empty, but she wasn't ready to leave yet. She played softly, working through a Bach invention she'd loved as a student. Her fingers felt different on the keys now, more confident, more purposeful. She wasn't just remembering the music anymore. She was planning for it. Tony came over and sat in one of the nearby chairs, listening as Maya played. You know, he said during a pause between pieces, I always wondered why you seemed different from the other servers. More focused, more, I don't know, like you were thinking about something else. I was, Maya said. I was always thinking about music, even when I was trying not to. Well, I'm going to miss having you here, but I'm excited to tell people I knew you when. Maya smiled and began playing again, this time choosing the composition she'd started for her mother. It was still unfinished, but now she knew she'd have time to complete it. She'd have time for all the music she'd been carrying inside her, all the pieces that had been waiting for their chance to be heard. 6 months later, Maya gave her comeback recital at the Chicago Cultural Center. Morrison was indeed in the front row, along with Helena, Tony, and Maya's mother, who had driven up from her small town to hear her daughter play professionally for the first time. The recital was sold out. Maya played her completed composition for her mother, the Chopin ballade that had changed her life, and several new pieces she'd written during her months of intensive practice. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes, but the moment Maya treasured most came afterward during the reception. A young man approached her, probably about 19, with calloused hands and tired eyes that reminded her of herself 3 years earlier. Excuse me, Ms. Rodriguez, he said nervously. I heard about your scholarship program, the one for musicians who had to stop studying. I was wondering. Maya smiled and handed him Helena's business card. Call tomorrow, she said. We'd love to help. As she watched him walk away, Maya thought about the piano at Meridian Restaurant, about the night when a stranger's challenge had given her back her life. She'd learned something important that night. Sometimes the most important performances happen when we're not trying to perform at all. Sometimes we find our way back to who we're meant to be in the most unexpected places. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get the chance to help others find their way too.